Hello, and welcome to mentorDINO. I'm your host, Caitlin Rossier. I am an architect and founder of mentorDINO. I firmly believe that architecture, engineering, and construction professionals can achieve true success by embracing human skills as their guiding principle. So each week, I interview amazing professionals in and around the AEC industry as a way to share stories, inspiration, and advice for others finding their own unique career path. Thank you to all of our current subscribers, and if you're new, we'd love to have you join our community. So if you like this episode, please do me a favor and hit subscribe, like, or leave a comment below. It really helps others be able to discover this resource and support them on their own career journey. So let's dive in. I really hope you enjoy this conversation. Welcome to the mentorDINO podcast. I would like to welcome Steve Lodge, architect, principal, and director of architecture at SmithGroup in Detroit, Michigan, and my boss. So this will be fun. So thank you, Steve, for taking the time to speak with me today.
You're welcome. I'm happy to be here, Caitlin. Thanks for asking me.
Yeah, I don't know how many people have the tables turned on them and interview their boss. So we'll see what you're up for.
It'll be a little different. I haven't been on an interview in probably about 12 years. So this will be a little different for me. I've been doing a lot of interviewing, but haven't been on the other side of the table. So
yeah, no pressure.
Yeah, no.
So I always like to start off with the loaded question. And if you don't mind introducing yourself to my audience and let us know a little bit about your journey so far in your career and education.
Okay. It's always interesting to me when people introduce themselves, how they identify themselves first, you know. I'm married. I have 2 kids. I have 2 grandkids now. My daughter is married. She has 2 kids. So we have a 2.5, almost 3-year-old grandson and a little over a year granddaughter. My wife, Lisa, and I have been married for 34 years. We met each other in high school and started dating after high school. And she has seen me on this journey all along the way. And it's been an interesting path that I've taken to be where I am today. I think, at least interesting to me, because it wasn't a direct path ever. It had all kinds of odd twists and turns. So I am an architect. I've been practicing architecture for about over 35 years now. It's hard to believe it's been that long. It doesn't seem like it's been that long, but I've worked at probably maybe 5 firms now. One I worked at twice, but at SmithGroup, I've been here now for 12 years. Prior to this, I worked at a firm called French Associates in Rochester, Michigan. For those that are listening, I guess SmithGroup is a nationwide firm. We have offices across the country. I work in the Detroit office, and you, of course, are in the Pittsburgh office. But prior to that, I worked for a firm called French Associates in Rochester, Michigan. I was there for almost 18 years. And then prior to that, I was at a firm called Gerald Yerk Associates. I was there for about 4 years. And then prior to that, I was at a small firm, Berman Associates, in a small little town in Romeo, which is near where I live in Washington, Michigan. I'm about 37 miles north of Detroit. And Romeo is a small little historical village, really, and had an architectural firm in it. That was the first firm I worked at. And I worked there for about maybe a year and a half or so while I was going to school, like a summer job and then part-time kind of thing. I then worked for another small firm in Rochester Hills, Michigan. And that was probably about 2 or 3 years I worked there. So worked at a bunch of small firms, really, before coming to SmithGroup. And there was a long time where I thought that was the best path. You know, work at a small firm, get a lot of good experience and knowledge and things like that. And then the bigger firms could come later. I'm not sure I believe that anymore. I think there was definitely a time where I thought that was the right way to go. I enjoyed the work that I was doing in most of those firms. I really enjoyed the work that I did. And I think I have really enjoyed and loved being an architect and doing the work that I've been blessed to do. It's been interesting and fun, frustrating and hard work most of the time, but enjoyable nonetheless. So I don't know how much more you want me to go into there, but maybe you've got some questions after all of that you want to ask me. So I'll pause there and let you ask me a few things.
Yeah. So starting out in a smaller firm, I guess, what was that transition like for you, going from so many years working in smaller firms to jumping into a very large firm?
Yeah. So the first three firms that I worked at, so Berman, Manchesky, Berman, Yerk, those four firms were all manual drafting. And 10 people or less. Berman was like 3, Manchesky was 3, Yerk was maybe 5 at one time, and then Berman was 2 again. French was, when I started at French, I was not drafting there. We had moved on to computers. So the transition was slow because those first 4 firms were really small firms. Sole proprietors, the owner of the firm worked there and kind of worked alongside me and showed me how to do things and, taught me a lot. And so I appreciated those interactions working directly with him. Some had client facing time, some did not. Most of the time it was him going out, meeting the client, coming back and telling me what we had to change or do. Once I started at Yerk Associates, there was a little bit of client time, but again, mostly as the sole proprietor, they're the one that wanted to have that client interface. There was a lack of that interaction. When I was at Yerk, I was working in downtown Rochester, which is kind of a really interesting town in northern Oakland County. Oakland County in Michigan is, one of the wealthiest counties, in the state, and had a nice mix of things. So it was an interesting community because it had a pretty vibrant downtown. It was surrounded with a lot of different scales of income. And so it supported that town pretty well. And I really enjoyed working in the downtown. I got to do a bunch of projects kind of on Main Street and in the local community. It was kind of like a little urban environment, and I really enjoyed working there and walking to lunch and walking on Main Street kind of thing. And I thought that I would have stayed there a lot longer than I did, but I really loved working there. And I liked the work that we were doing, had some interesting things to work on there. But he didn't pay very well, and I didn't have any insurance. And by this time I was married and 1 kid, a mortgage and car payments and all of that. And, he just wasn't working for me. So I had to get to a slightly bigger firm to get some health insurance benefits. And so that was the reason why I left that firm. And then I went to French Associates, and I was there for about 18 years. But while I was at Yerk, we had started using a computer. So we learned AutoCAD and we're drawing on AutoCAD. It was kind of funny. He bought this computer, and the guy that was working for him said, well, I know how to use a computer. So he kind of set up AutoCAD for him and all of that. And this Yerk, the owner, Gerald Yerk, was like, okay, well, we got to make this thing profitable. So we got to run this thing all day long. We got to have people on shifts. And so there was one guy came in at 3:00 and worked till midnight or whatever. And it was kind of comical at the time. That guy got the graveyard shift or whatever. But so we got to learn how to use it there and had a couple other people that hired in that we were kind of all learning together. But that set me up for being able to go to French Associates, which was fully computer, and go there. And even though I knew a little bit, I didn't know everything I needed to know. But was there and learned pretty quickly. It too was in Rochester. I got to stay in the same town, but went from a Main Street location to just a few blocks off of Main Street. Still, we went into town quite a bit, Nate, and then things evolved from there. But French started out with 6 people when I was there. We grew up to about 40. It was only architects and interior designers. And then when I left, it had gone up to a peak of almost 40 and then dropped down to about 6 again. And so another story there as to why I left, but I enjoyed the work that we were doing. French Associates was primarily a K-12 and municipal firm. And so spent, most of those years working in schools and municipal projects. So.
Yeah. Is that when you started getting more client facing time since you didn't have as much starting out?
Yep. I was meeting with clients and the project managers, the project architects that were leading the projects, and they would take, kind of me as a young architect, along. And they started to let me lead some of those meetings, and then took me to interviews and had sections of interviews to do, or portions of interviews to do. And that was really great. I really thankful for the people at French for multiple reasons, and I'll get into that side because the one thing I haven't talked about yet is schooling. So don't let me forget, and we'll circle back on that. Mm-hmm. French Associates
we'll definitely be circling back on that.
French Associates was a good firm because I really felt like that was a home. It was started by a gentleman by the name of Roy G. French in Port Huron, Michigan. And he was doing K-12 work then, started like in 71 or 2 or something like that firm did. And he had hired his son, David French. Roy was still alive when I started with the firm, and we got to see him. They had 2 offices, one in Rochester, one in Port Huron. And Roy would come to Rochester and, visit us every once in a while. And Christmas parties, and things like that. It was a family firm. His wife was just a great, they were great people. And so getting to know him and the founder of the firm, and that it had transitioned to his son and a partner that he had gone to school with, David French and Doug LaFurl, were the 2, president and vice president of the firm after Roy kind of stepped down and retired. And they were great people to work for. Very supportive, understanding. It was a family firm, and it kind of stayed that way. There was 3 or 4 people that were transitioning into ownership after David and Doug. And they were good guys as well. Again, Dale, Jerome, Paul Corneliuson were the kind of second in commands, if you will. And they transitioned to ownership in the firm after a time when I was there. And they were good people to work for as well. I worked with Paul maybe a little bit more than I did with Dale on projects. And so I got to know Paul really well. And he was just a great person. I talk about him like he's not with us anymore, but he is. He still owns that firm along with Dale Jerome, and they're still doing well. But so I really enjoyed the work that I was doing there at French Associates, and K-12 work was. I enjoyed it. I thought it was good and satisfying. I really enjoyed the work that I was doing and the impact I was making to school districts and communities around Michigan. So.
Yeah. So you've always liked the firms that you've been in and the projects that you were working on. What made you shift off of French Associates after being there almost 18 years? Yeah.
So 2008, we had this recession in the architectural community, right? The bulk of their work was, like I said, K-12 and municipal work. And that really got hit hard, with that recession. And they survived it initially. Things would slow down. We had to go through a couple of series of layoffs. I was really fortunate that I didn't have to get laid off. The work that I was doing, the commitment that I have, I think, I'll pause for a minute and say, I think I have a very strong work ethic. I got that from my father, who was always a really hard worker. I was just, as I was kind of getting ready for this conversation, I pulled out some old information, and I got to reread a letter from David French that he wrote to me. when I told him, he had already retired by this time, by the time I left French. But when I told him I was going to SmithGroup, I let him know. And he just wrote a very nice letter to me, thanking me for the effort that I had put into his firm and just the projects and the impact that I had made. It was really a great letter, and one that I'll cherish for a long time, because had gone through some really difficult circumstances while I was at that firm. And when I say that it was a family firm and that they cared about you, it was clear that he truly did. And it was just a good place to be. I had taken on things that maybe others hadn't done. We had moved into a building that we designed, and I was, again, fortunate to work on. We won an AIA Michigan award for that building in Rochester, and I was able to be the project architect on that, see it through construction. We moved into it, and it was just a great place to work. I really loved that building, and I especially enjoyed working there in the evenings. Some people would say, why would you like to work in the evening? Well, it was quiet. I lived 15 minutes from the office. And so I had a young family. I could go home and have dinner with my family, and I would come back to the office. We were on computer, no laptops. Desktop machines. And so I could go back to work and work for a couple hours and then come back home and go to bed. And it had a barrel vaulted wood glulam ceiling with wood tongue and groove ceiling, deck boards on it, and had a real nice orange glow. So I always told people it was like sitting in front of a fireplace working in the evening. It was just a really great place. Had a very nice setting, looking out onto woods, all glass on the south face of the building. It was pretty unique for its time because it was a geothermal building, done long before geothermal was in popularity like it is today. So this would have been like in maybe, I don't know the date, I'll have to figure that out. I don't know, probably the mid 90s, late 90s would have been early 2000s that we did that. And so there was, 300 wells or 60 wells, 300 feet deep in the parking lot. That it was closed loop system and heat pumps. So no air condensing units anywhere. No natural gas in the building, all electric. And so because I was the project architect on it, I got to become very familiar with the building, and then almost acted as the building manager. We leased part of the building out to tenants, and I handled all the service contracts for the building. I was the go-to person if something went wrong or wasn't working right, or the thermostats needed to be reset, the light bulbs needed to be changed, ordered, or whatever. I was the guy doing that. So it was a unique setup because David and Doug had owned the building. The firm didn't own the building. They owned the building. And they formed an LLC that owned the building, and then the firm, leased space from them. And so it allowed them to have an income, after they retired, which they continued to own that building. So, I was really fortunate to be able to work on that and be part of an award-winning building. And it had a pretty prominent location on the street, and a lot of people knew it, as they went by. So.
Yeah, and learn a little bit on the facilities side.
Yep.
Taking care of it.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Now, before we jump into SmithGroup stuff, I do want to jump back to your education.
Yeah.
Because I remember when I was coming in for an interview at SmithGroup, you can see the people that are on the calendar invite, and naturally you're going on the website to look up people's information. And everybody's description is always just about their achievements or big projects they're working on. And yours is different.
Yeah.
Yours talks about challenges in the education process and putting that out there. Not many people share that information. Yeah. And I know myself included, I struggled getting into undergrad, and it was very hard and stressful of a process. Yeah. So I wanted to learn more about your struggles through the education side and getting into architecture from the start.
Yeah. So my dad was a machinist growing up. never went to college. In fact, he didn't even finish high school. He went into the Navy, learned his trade, and we were not a wealthy family, didn't come from a lot of means, and so kind of a blue collar, family growing up. And I didn't do great in high school. I did okay, but not great. I really GPA, didn't do great. So I had to go all the way back to like elementary school. Because that's kind of where this all began for me. I was in elementary school. Now, my wife's name is Lisa. As I said, I met her in high school. But when I was in elementary school, my wife lived in New York, outside of Buffalo. And so I didn't know her, obviously. But when I was in elementary school, I used to doodle a lot and, kind of draw and sketch. And I always drew like houses and, the kind of atypical or typical kind of front elevation of a house with, second floor windows, a door in the center, 2 windows, curtains, and a chimney. And so, this girl that I liked at the time, whose name also happens to be Lisa, this would be an excellent story if it was the same Lisa, but it's not. She said,
you just have to change the story.
I know. I thought about doing that, but I just figured that's just not really integrity. So I really can't do that, but I really wish it was, because this would just make a great Hallmark movie, wouldn't it? I mean, it would just be a perfect. Anyway, this girl I liked, Lisa, was watching what I was doing. And she said, "What are you drawing?" "I'm drawing a house." And she said, "What are you going to be, an architect?" And like, we're probably 5th, 6th grade, something like that. And I'm like, "What's an architect?" She goes, "Well, they draw houses." I'm like, "Oh, okay. If that works for you, then it works for me." Well, her dad was in construction, so it kind of made sense that, she might know that term. So somewhere in elementary school, I decided I'm going to be an architect. And so I went to junior high and started taking drafting classes and really enjoyed them. I really enjoyed drafting, manual drafting especially. I liked being able to control the line weight of, the lead, and took drafting all through junior high and high school, and was involved in some program called VICA in high school, Vocational Industrial Clubs of America. And so we would have these it was an out extracurricular kind of activity thing. You'd go and draw things in the evenings and weekends and go to competitions and see how fast you could draw a house and stuff like that. I really enjoyed that. And I always really enjoyed how houses went together. I remember when I was I think it was elementary school, maybe junior high, there was a house that was being constructed on my way to school. And I stopped by there one time by myself and walked around trying to figure out what the rooms were and where the kitchen was. And I went back and talked to the builder and asked if I could keep copies of his plans of the house, because I really liked the house. And he gave them to me, and I held on to them for a long time. I then returned those plans to that house years later and gave them back to the people. So I had this idea that I wanted to be an architect all through school, but my grades really weren't that great. And so I ended up having to go, GPA was kind of low. I didn't really focus on, thinking about the long-term effect. I was just kind of marking time in school. I had fun and did okay. But so I ended up having to go. I think I applied to Lawrence Technological University. I didn't get accepted because my GPA was low. And so somebody there suggested I go to community college to boost up my GPA, which I did. And went to a community college here in my area for about a year and a half. Reapplied. I should side note, the application, there was a good friend of our families that we went to church with that knew me well. He was a really good mentor of mine. He was not involved in architecture at all, but he was he owned his own business. And his name, I should mention, is Dick Dryden. And he owned a company called Sue Dan. It was named after his kids, Sue and Dan. And they were a manufacturing company. And he and I spent quite a bit of time together. He was involved in some leadership positions at our church that we went to. And my dad didn't go to church with us. And he knew that, and he knew that father is really important in a young man's life growing up and in church as well. And so he kind of took me under his wing and, just spent time with me trying to teach me things that I needed to know. And he's the one who offered to pay for my application to Lawrence Tech. And so I was thankful that he did that. And so I did. I applied, and I finally got accepted into my undergrad. And so I graduated from high school in 1983, spent a year and a half or so at the community college, finally started at Lawrence Tech in 1985. And started there in the fall, moved out of my house, moved down to the school, Lawrence Tech. It was actually LIT at the time, Lawrence Institute of Technology, known in the Michigan area for engineering primarily, but also architecture. And so a technical college, private college, and started classes there. And went for the first year full time, kind of ran out of money. The place I was living, I didn't live on campus because they didn't have very good campus housing there. Not very much. It was mostly a commuter school. It's in Southfield, Michigan. And so I moved back home, started going to school part-time, and I continued to go to school part-time. I'm going to side note again, backtrack a little bit. Graduating from high school, I worked at this company called Sudan that Dick Dryden owned in Rochester Hills, and worked there for about a year and a half while I was going to Macomb part-time. And then I worked for him over the summers while I was going to school as well. Interesting thing there. I got to work for him for a couple of years and stayed connected with him in that business. Later, when I worked for Yerk Associates, I got to design a new building for that same company that I had worked for years before. So that was a kind of neat connection there. But so got my undergrad, went to school part-time, worked part-time at a variety of different things for, like I said, Sudan and a couple of small firms, some internships, summer things, working part-time, going to school. And graduated with my undergrad in 1990, the year I got married. And so I finished up shortly after I got married with my undergrad, working part-time. During that time is when I had started, I think, working at Manchesky Architects and had done a little stint at Berman. So I got out of school. I was thankful I got out. And I just wanted to work. I had been going to school, and I just kind of wanted to live. And we needed to get a house, had a kid. And so more time than I liked elapsed from the time that I, stopped going to school until I tried to get back into school to do my master's. Because I still had this dream that I wanted to be an architect, and I knew that I couldn't be. But during that time was when I was at French as well. And I was thinking, I had talked to them about, well, I don't have my license yet. Do I need to have my license? And they basically told me, no, as long as you're doing the work that you need to do, you don't need to seal the drawings. We do that already. You don't have to do that. But it was Paul Cornelius, and it told me, but you should want to get your license. That's something that you should want to have. It'll serve you well in the future. But there was a time where I thought that I really didn't think I needed it. If I'm doing the work and they're going to pay me to do the work, at the time they told me, we're going to pay you the same whether you have your license or not. So it's up to you. It's a personal decision that you should make. And so through a number of things that had happened personally with my wife, my family, I decided, okay, I need to go back. I need to finish this thing that I started. And so I tried to get back into school, and LTU wouldn't let me back in. I wasn't good enough. My GPA in undergrad wasn't good enough for them. And so they said, no, you can't get back in. Well, I didn't accept that at face value. I said, well, what do I have to do? And they said, you need to, increase your GPA. So they recommended, a couple of classes that I take, kind of remedial classes in graphics and, to boost my GPA. And I think they still wouldn't let me in. And so David French was encouraging me to do this. And so he wrote a letter to the dean telling him that, I'd been working for him for 3 or 4 years at that point, that that I was a really good architect, and they shouldn't, prevent me from finishing what I had started. I don't remember if I ever saw a copy of that letter, but I know that he wrote it. And I got accepted into the school. And so by this time, I'm in my, I don't know, whatever, what did I start? My master's in 1998. And so I was working full time. I was very busy, had project responsibilities. Like I said, I had 2 kids, a house, a dog, and a mortgage. And, I'm going to school now, much older than most of the students that I'm attending with, more mature, more dedicated, I think, to the craft of what I was doing. And I had been out working. And so the reality of what architecture is versus what you learn in school, was well understood by me. And so it was a bit of a challenge at times to not let that reality kind of squash creativity, in some of the classes that I was taking. I'm going to take a breath and get a drink of water, and you're going to formulate a question for me.
Yeah, I can do that. Because it's not easy. I know, like I got denied from every undergrad program I applied to. And I only got into Kent after the first round of people went through, and you find out who didn't accept.
Sure.
And it was like, okay, I'm ready to do summer studio to get in. I probably would have applied to Michigan schools if I realized that Detroit's only a 4-hour drive from my house. I don't think I realized that until I joined SmithGroup. So it's quicker for me to get to Detroit than it is to go out to Philly. And seeing the opportunities that, like, I know. And so it's just, I struggled with that. So just the fact that even you noting a part of your story on it wasn't easy on the website was really affirming to myself when applying. Because it's, it always creates that like self-doubt. Am I good enough to even be an architect? Should I even be here type scenario, or people getting through the exams and people start to think how many exams they failed starts to define who they are as an architect. Right. And they're not. Like if you didn't share that on the website, and I didn't know most of that story till just now, like I would have thought you flew through with flying colors. You're a director of architecture. You're doing all these things. You're always calling out different ways to do the work better, more efficiently, and technically improve things that you never would know that background. So I appreciate that you at least share part of it on the website, and that's atypical for what you see.
Yeah, when we were asked to do that, I kind of wondered about how I should present that, like how should I talk about this? Because it isn't, and I think it goes to tell us sometimes that we don't really know people's backgrounds, and we assume some things that maybe we shouldn't. And so I think it is good to share that. I think I have appreciated all along the way for the people that I've worked for. And I think the way that I'm telling you this story is because, each of those people and others that I haven't even mentioned have had impact on me in my life. And it's about the people that I've worked with. I mean, the work is good, and we'll get to that. There's been some great work that I've done. At least I think it's been great. But it's the people that have been there that have been encouraging and, kind of at your side, kind of walking alongside with you. It's never just been one person. It's always been different people kind of coming in at a time, and kind of walking beside you and pushing you forward and encouraging you. That's what matters.
Yeah, because you could have just chugged away.
Yeah.
And just, skipped it. So,
right. Certainly the most important one has been my wife, because she's had to be there, all along the way, kind of sitting there waiting for me to kind of get this done and having the assurance that I'm going to do it. And, we haven't even gotten to the exams yet, right? It's just getting through the school and all of that. So, but so I got in, and I did the classes, and I would say that I did my thesis, and I'm really thankful that I did it the way that I did, because it should have been like a 2-year program, but I think I crammed it into 4. The thesis I didn't take my thesis last because I knew that I wanted to really do what I could to focus on that, and then there was a master class, I think they called it, was the last one, and it was kind of taken over the summer after you finished your thesis. And so, and I remember while I was doing my thesis, full year-long class, there was a student that it was his last class. That was it. Once he was done with that, he was done and out. And about halfway through the second semester, like he tanked, like he just tapped out, like he couldn't do it anymore. He just lost his drive. And I was afraid that was going to happen to me because school was never easy for me. The academic part was always more challenging. I think I took calculus three times before I passed it with a D. Yes. I got out of that one. I knew that. Pass. Yes, right. That's what I said. So I knew that I had to have the endurance to run it, all the way through, and I really focused on it. And I really give credit to Art Smith, my professor of my thesis class, because halfway through, after the first semester, another good story there. A side note, we can talk about that later, which will relate to some SmithGroup work. I didn't get a very good critique from the critics that were, the charrette, not the charrette, but the crit that I had at the end of the first semester was pretty a big downer. In fact, they didn't think that what I was doing was the right direction to go in at all. And it was Art Smith who told me after that my presentation, and they criticized me pretty heavily for what I was doing. He said, well, do you think what you're doing is right? Do you think it's the right thing? And I said, yeah, I do. He said, okay, so just prove them wrong. Just prove that they're wrong. It's that simple. It's KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. Stick to your concept, stick to your guns, and prove them wrong. Can you do that? He asked me that question. And I said, yeah, I guess so. No, can you do that? And I said, yes, I can do that. He said, okay, it's that simple. Go do it. And so I stuck to my guns. I think I had like a D or a C or something like that after the first semester from those professors. So not from my professor, but from the jury that, critiqued. At the end of my thesis, it had turned into an A. And all but one agreed that the project direction that I had taken and continued to stay on track with was the right direction. The one who disagreed with that was Paul Urbanek. Paul Urbanek was the design director for SmithGroup. Little did I know at the time that I would end up working with Paul Urbanek.
I'm glad. I hope any SmithGroup listeners got it the second I started laughing. So
yeah. Anyway,
but nobody ever says that in studio. Like, it's always tear your project apart, flip it over, and make you squirm. I wish I had a professor at any one point that I had a really bad crit saying, like, how can you prove them wrong? Like, what is changing how you present, either showing or verbally, to show the idea differently if you feel that that's the right path to go. And so I think that's brilliant by that studio professor to kind of like push you in that right direction.
I agree. I didn't know how I was going to get there, but I knew what I had to do. And then I knew that he would be there to remind me of that every step of the way, that if I was going to go off and try something, well, I did this because I thought it would look cool. Nope. Does it tie to your concept? If it doesn't, don't do it. Keep it simple. Stick to your concept. Go back to your concept. If it doesn't support your concept, don't do it. And so I just kept telling myself, that all the way through. It was grueling. It was brutal. I mean, so I'm working at French during this time, and I had classes, that started at 3:00 in the afternoon. It's a 45-minute drive down to school. I'd be working from 8 until 3. I'd leave work, drive down to school for a 3-hour, design class, come back at 7 or something, pick up dinner on the way, go back to work because I had to work full time. I mean, I had to remain full-time employed. So I was working full-time and going to school, which doesn't sound like a lot. Like to now, a lot of people are doing that right now. We've got employees right now that are getting their master's degree online in the evenings, but this was driving and doing the work in studio for a 3-hour block or whatever. And it was, 2 classes or something. So not to mention having, a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old and, cutting the grass and, doing family things, remodeling a house, whatever I was doing, all of that was all on top of it. I don't know how I did it. I really don't. When I look back on it now, it's not a path I would recommend, but it is the path I took and it's the path I chose. Had I known how it was going to go, would I have done it differently? Maybe. Am I thankful that I did it the way that I did? Yeah, I think I learned a lot about, this craft and the way that it can be done. And I think the description of me that I've liked the best, that somebody told me I'm very passionate about what I do. I get excited talking about the path that I've been on because it's just filled with passion to me. Like there's no other way to explain, why I've done what I've done. I think about this often, that there's people probably more qualified to be in the role that I'm in right now at SmithGroup. And I thought that when I was asked to be in this role, I wasn't sure why they thought, but they obviously saw something in me that they wanted me to be in this role. And so I accepted it. And I have done it passionately ever since. I said I would from the time that I started, that I will, work my hardest to do the best that I can. And I think I've done that. I have been passionate about it. That passion has changed focus a little bit, during the time that I've been here. But I am passionate about architecture and passionate about the things that I believe in. So I think that helps to drive me, because architects are a little quirky anyway, right? Like we really get really connected to the projects that we're involved in. And I'm no exception to that. I feel a little bit of me has gone into every project that I've worked on, because it's the project and, what it's doing and who I'm doing it for that drives me. It's not the dollar. It's not the people I work for or the people I work with. It's what I'm trying to accomplish, or I've been tasked with trying to accomplish for the client. And that's what has driven me, I think, on the projects that I've worked on, and why I've worked the hours that I have and how hard I have it, is because of this idea of, they have this thing I'm trying to solve. And that's what I'm trying to do. That's what I've been tasked to do. And so I want to do it to the best of my ability. I remember my dad telling me when I was working at Sudan, sweeping floors, working in a warehouse. Thankfully, I never worked it was a stamping plant. I never worked on the stamping plants that have all my fingers. That, if you're sweeping a floor and that's your job, then sweep it to the best of your ability. If you're making boxes, that's what I would make, was boxes, and drive a high-low, then do the best you can at it. We need all people working in all areas and doing the best that they can. And so to be a professional at what they do, whatever that is, it's not a disgrace to work in a labor-intensive job, but do it to the best of your ability. Don't be lazy. There's an expectation that you're going to do something because that's what you're getting paid to do. So do it to the best that you can. Don't do it halfway. And so I think that's how I've, tried to lead my work ethic all my years of working.
Yeah, that's great advice. And for anybody at any level, any position, no matter what you're doing.
Yeah.
I know I know when people start to transition into that principal or even the director position, you start to pull away from project work and doing a little bit more office admin or staff, because the director of architecture for your position is a little bit more staff based, is more what I've seen. So how was that transition for you moving to that position, and do I even have the role correctly?
Yeah, to some extent. I mean, I think that's one thing that, so SmithGroup had, when I started at SmithGroup, I came as a project architect. Like I said, I left French because I didn't say this, but I didn't know if they were going to make it through. We had dwindled down quite a bit. And even though I liked the work that I was doing, we, kept losing people. And so either through layoffs or through their own, just lack of work. And so, I was in my late 40s, I guess, looking at 50, and I had kind of predetermined for whatever reason that I really didn't want to be the last one out the door of this building that I had, worked on and slaved over. We had changed locations in the building. It had been kind of relegated to not the fireplace space that I described earlier. I was getting I was working hard. I had taken a pay cut. There was some loss of benefits and things like that. And so it was all had to be done. And I was treated well. I wasn't, poorly treated or anything, but I was just getting a little bitter, I think. I was working really hard. One of my consulting engineers, as I was working late one evening, and so was he, said something to me about, well, you're an owner in the firm. I mean, that's why you're working so hard. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm not an owner of this firm. I'm just an employee. And it made me wonder, wait a second, why am I working this hard? Putting in 60-hour weeks and 70-hour weeks. I was in line for ownership. That was part of the plan, that I was going to transition to ownership. I anticipated that I would retire from French Associates. And, but because of 2008 and just, the economy and all of that plan just, went to pot. So, it was after that kind of realization. I don't know that it was a good thing, but it was then that I said, I think I might need to find a different job. But I've been doing this for 18 years, K-12. I don't want to go to another K-12 firm because the other firms in the area, I competed against them. I couldn't go to the competition. Ethically, that just bothered me. So not that it's wrong. It just wasn't right for me. And so Tricia Beck, I had worked with at French Associates for a number of years. We were really good friends there. And she had left a year or so before me and went to SmithGroup. And we stayed in contact. She contacted me one day and said, hey, guess who just came for an interview here? It was another coworker that we had that had worked with us at French. And I said, you're kidding me. How did he get an interview? She said, well, he knows somebody that works here. I said, well, when's my interview? And she said, do you want to leave French? And I'm like, maybe, but I mean, they don't do K-12 work, so they're not going to hire me. She said, you know how to put a building together. They'll hire you. Okay. So I put my resume together and sent it down there. She took it to who it needed to be gone to. I think I had 3 or 4 people in interviews with me. Apparently they liked something they saw, and they made me an offer. And so I started there. I started out working on a higher ed project for Western Michigan University. It was a dining hall project, and I was the lead project PA. It was already started in SD. On week 1, they said, hey, Steve, welcome aboard. Here's the project. You're a week behind, or whatever. It was already behind the schedule. And so introduced me to the team. We started working on it. We were furiously working away at it. It was going to be a really great project, a dining facility, and great people were already on the team. And I was trying to figure out how we put buildings together and how we did our drawings. And I knew Revit a little bit, but I was really good at CAD. But this project was in Revit, and that freaked me out a little bit. How am I going to do that? I had learned Revit at French, but we never really used it there to its full capacity. So I'm trying to learn Revit and be the PA and, figure out how things go together. And we get into close to end of CDs, mid CDs, and the university got a lot of grief because we were going to be cutting down a bunch of trees in a sustainable way and reusing the wood in the project, as well as planting new trees. But some students and activists on campus got pretty heated up over this, and students were chaining themselves to trees so we wouldn't cut them down. And so the project ultimately got canceled. And so it was kind of put on hold, and they were going to try to do something, but they didn't know when or what it would look like or where it was going to go. And so I bounced around a couple of smaller projects and was beginning to think that maybe I had made a mistake, that maybe this wasn't the right place for me. And it was after just about a year, I think, that I was there. Terry Guitar was the director of architecture at the time, had been in the role for about 6 or 7 years, I believe. And he wanted to step out of that role. There was a whole infrastructure decision that they had to make about the way the discipline of architecture was arranged in the office in Detroit. And so Jeff Kerwing, the director of operations, asked me out to lunch one day and said, "Hey, Steve, could we have lunch? I wanted to talk to you about something." I'm like, "Oh, yeah, okay, you're my boss. I'll go out to lunch with you, sure." So he began to describe the way the discipline was organized in the office, and that they were looking at ways, because there was about 35, 40 people at the time, and Terry was trying to keep in touch with all of them. It was becoming very difficult for him to do that as one person, and they wanted to reorganize the office. And so he was describing this organization that they wanted to go through. They had put together a committee of people to kind of talk about it, and they rightfully just put together the characteristics of what they felt like the director of architecture should have. And then once they established what those characteristics were, they said, okay, now who in the firm, in the office do we think could do this? And my name came up. And so he talked to me about this and described this to me. And he said, would you be interested in the director of architecture role? And I was like, what? I've only been here like a year. I haven't even done an entire project. What do you mean, director of architecture? I can't. They said, well, here's the characteristics. We think you have all of these. And we think you would be the best to lead this discipline. And I thought about it, prayed about it. And I said, okay, I don't have nearly as much experience as Terry has. And there's other people. And they said, yeah, it's not just about the experience. It's about the way you approach things, the way you think about things, the drive that you have. And just, I think, I was pretty taken aback by this. And so I said, okay, I'll do it. And they allowed me time to kind of help put together the team of discipline leaders that we have in our office. We've, broken our discipline, which now is up to about 75 people between Detroit and Pittsburgh. We have 4 discipline group leads that report to me, and then all of the rest of the architectural staff reports to them. So it breaks it up into kind of 4 groups, as we call it. And it breaks, I think, the office down a little bit into bite-sized chunks, for people to be able to relate and connect to people a lot better. It wasn't my idea. That was the framework that was being worked on, and I've just helped implement it. And I think it's been good for us and good for our staff, good for the projects. And so in that transition, it's been kind of strange for me because I, started here doing projects. I still do projects. I still have project responsibilities as a director of architecture. Mm-hmm. All of the discipline leads in our company and certainly in the Detroit office are expected to have some project work responsibility, because we don't want to be too far out of touch with the work that's happening, day in and day out with our staff and with our clients. And so staying in touch with all of those things has been important. But I've had to be okay with taking a step back from kind of being in the weeds, where I typically have been very comfortable working out all the details. I love doing that. That's something I've always loved doing. I've always loved tearing things apart and putting them back together and figuring out how they go together. And so, being a technical architect, that, kind of is what we do. And so I've had to get comfortable with that. And I've been okay with that at this stage in my career. It is more of a kind of a managerial position. So I'm interviewing, I'm hiring, I'm mentoring, I'm teaching, and just going through the daily things necessary to run an office and staff an office and staff projects. And so I like that part of it because it gets me on the people side of things. I like connecting with our staff. I wish that I could connect more individually with everybody, because I think one of the things that I've tried to keep is that one-on-one connection that I have enjoyed over the years that I worked in the smaller firms, and having somebody that knows me and knows what's going on in my life and is there to walk alongside me when I needed it. And I've tried to do that, for other people as well. Hopefully have impacted some people in big ways. I know it's not possible for everybody, but I do try, and it pains me a little bit that I can't do it more, because that's what I really enjoy is connecting with people. And I think it's that connection that is really ultimately what drove me on the projects. I really enjoyed the people that I was working with on the client side, and doing good work for them because, they needed it or the community needed or whatever it was, but it was making connections with those people that were behind the project that meant the most to me. I liked the projects too, but it was always the people that I worked with, and certainly the people that I worked alongside in the firms I worked with as well. I don't want to diminish that, but I think it's really what drove me was working with somebody that I really enjoyed working alongside.
Yeah, I think that's where we have a lot in common. I know I always thrive when my team is working well together and gelling. We know what's going on in each other's lives. We can help each other. We can help fill gaps as we need it. I still have, before I left my last firm, the youngest, I think she was licensed when I left, architect actually drew me a card, and it was the team as a family, and I was the mom to her. And I'm like, I'm keeping this forever. And I have it right on my left, and I still see it every day. Yeah. I think it's hilarious, but it's those connections that we make on projects. That's what really makes a difference for a project, regardless of how well designed it is or, how good or bad the document set was. It's those bonds you create along the way.
I think that's true. I go back to that idea of passion that I mentioned earlier. I love what I do. I love the architecture that I've been able to be involved in. And I've told this to many high school students at, career fairs or, high school talks that I've had. I love what I do. I really love what I do. And so much so that maybe even more than I should. Because I work and it's hard to stop work to come home. Once I'm home, I've been fortunate to be home. It was one of the curses maybe of COVID is that it really blurred that line between, work time and home time. But when I was home, I was home. When I was at work, I was at work. But there was times I couldn't leave work because I wasn't done with the thing that I was working on, and I mentally just couldn't put it down. But I love what I do. And you know what? They're going to pay me to do it. What? Why not do this? To do something that you absolutely love to do. And the bonus is they pay you to do what you love to do. That to me is what I've told high school students. Figure out what you love doing or what you can be passionate about, and then go find a way to get paid to do that. Whatever it is. That to me, there's too many people that are out there doing something they don't want to do because they have a mortgage or they have, the things that they have to pay for. Life is too short to work at doing something that you don't like doing. I remember there was a guy that started when I was at French. Trish and I were working in this small room. We were growing as a firm, as I mentioned, and we had this small office. So we had three people, kind of sitting in together. It was me, Trisha, and this other guy, Craig Westrick, had just graduated from school, and he had been working for a while for us, a couple of months or whatever. And at some point, it dawned on him. One day, he said, "You know what I figured out? I spend more time with you guys here in this room than I do at home, awake. Is this what I'm going to do for the rest of my life? And I'm like, yep. Get used to it. We had a lot of fun in that little room. We called it the romper room because it was me and the kids, because Tricia had just graduated a year or two ahead of him. And then there was Craig as well. And we had a lot of fun antics in that room. But the benefit of that room was that I talk loud on the phone, and they could hear everything I said on the phone because we were in one room, like it was an office, like maybe a 200 square foot office or something. And so it was good for them because they got to learn a lot of the way I interacted with contractors and clients and consultants on the phone as they heard what I was talking about. A good reason why it's good to be in the office working side by side and learning from the things that are happening around us with that, isn't, kind of indirect learning, I guess, as opposed to direct learning. So my little plug for working in the office.
And sometimes not always having your headphones on too.
Yeah, not always having your headphones on.
No, I remember
what's going on.
Like I was in the office today, and somebody that's like 2 years in was always very quiet and shy, and I started working with them, and he would ask questions afterwards. Hey, like, why aren't we doing this? And questioning things from the meeting. I'm like, why didn't you bring that up? Ask the questions, start speaking up for the design or the direction, different questions on how we approach it. And sitting in the office today and listening to him on a call, I'm not on that project team, and him sticking up for how something needs to be modeled and organized and the proper approach and walking through it. And I end up telling him afterwards, I'm like, I am so proud of you. I'm like, you don't understand you don't remember where you were 2 years ago and how you were quiet and you would have just let a meeting go and it not be the right direction. And now you're standing up for how a model needs to get put together properly. And I'm like, and I had no arguments to anything you were saying. I agreed with anything I could understand from only hearing one side of the conversation. But even those moments and just seeing how people grow, but then also learning for yourself. So it's kind of both ways in the office when you can start to surround yourself and see how people change and develop is always, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's always fun for me.
It's been fun for me too. I mean, to see people that certainly at French for the amount of time that I was there, kind of grow and progress in their career and develop. And I remember telling a couple of young architects, that they were really blessed because they got to work with me. They got to work with another, senior project architect and another senior project architect on different projects. And they were, supportive to those people, but they got to learn from each one and grab the best of us and make it their own and kind of create their own. And I said, don't rush the path to being in a leadership position. Soak up the opportunity to learn from as many people as you can to make yourself better down the road. And I think that's one of the things that we have to be cautious about. And I don't know how to put it into nice words sometimes. I tend to be direct and blunt with my commentary at times. I've been cautioned about that. But, rushing to, I want to lead, I want to lead, I want to be in the lead. We all want to be in that decision-making, but we have to know how to do that. We know how to have to do it, with finesse. And I've marveled at people that do a great job at handling a client, in difficult circumstances and, calmly, kind of leading them down a path that you want to lead them down. And it's been interesting to see people kind of grow into that and watch how they do it on their own way, not the same way that you have. And so I've tried to emulate some of those things that have been shown to me over the years to people. Again, probably could do it better at times than I have. I tend to be impatient at times and jump in because I know the answer instead of letting somebody, who could answer. I think I've been getting better at that and not jumping in and telling somebody what the answer is, but letting them, kind of wrestle with it and come up with it. But I do know that it's an important learning, step that people to have is to have the confidence, to have the answer, and reminding people that, you went to school for this, you've got a degree, you're qualified to be in the room, and, use the voice that you've been given to speak up. And when you know something, provide the answer. If you don't, then tell them you're going to go find the answer and you'll get back with them, whatever the circumstances may be. I was surprised once when I was, go ahead. Were you going to say something?
You're good. I
was in a meeting on a construction site when I was working at French, and construction meeting, and the gentleman that was the senior project architect on it, I was working with him on it. We were in a meeting. Public speaking was a challenge for him at times. And I remember we'd be sitting in a meeting, and I knew he knew the answer they were asking, but he didn't come up with the answer. And I knew the answer. And I'm like, are you going to, okay, this is what it is. And I kind of waited for him to, and then he was like, yeah, that's what it is, and so I just thought, having the confidence that, what the answer is, and you're qualified to be in the room. So it's okay to say the answer. And if you're not sure, then get sure, and then come back and provide the answer later. But it is, I don't know, it's been there's a whole lot of other stories I could have told, I guess, and things we didn't even talk about any projects, but I have enjoyed the path.
Most of the time, I don't even get to projects.
Yeah.
I usually have plenty of conversations just figuring out our careers, because there's so many different paths to take and things you didn't expect along the way that I think is important for people to hear.
Yeah. So I think that's the one thing that I've wanted to say is that it's not been one path. Like I kind of meandered around, and it's never one path. It's never a clear, I want to be a director of architecture someday, so how do I get there? I landed here. I didn't, target this spot. An opportunity was presented in front of me, and I think that's something that's happened all along my career. Opportunities have been presented in front of me, and I took advantage of them to the best that I could. And, it took me to a different place that I never thought I would be.
Yeah. It's always keeping your eyes open, and you never know where it's going to take you.
Yep. Being open to, a different path, or something different that you didn't expect. And I think has been good for me. And I always like wrapping up my podcast with this final question. And it's, what advice do you have for young professionals just starting their careers? It's a good question. I think one of the things that I've tried to tell some young professionals is, some people have asked me in interviews, what's your ideal candidate look like? And I think I have told those people that have asked me that question, and I'm trying to think of the way I normally phrase it, and it's escaping me at this second. But I think having a mindset of curiosity, of asking questions of why and how come, which is kind of funny because my wife and I were just talking about our grandson, Lucas. He's at that stage where he's asking why about everything, why?
It's driving you nuts.
Well, we're laughing about it because we knew that stage was coming. But I think asking the question of why or how come, like I have learned the most by asking that question why, or just being, voraciously curious about something. And I think as architects, that's something we have to be, is curious about something, because we're going to be working on something that maybe we've never had to deal with before. And so trying to understand what it is the client is doing in the facility that they have, whatever that is, whether it's working with people or widgets or making something or creating something, what do you need to create it? Because we have to be a little bit of an expert at everything, and trying to understand, the psychology of architecture, the behavioral aspects of architecture, and why things happen the way they do. And do you always have to do it that way? Does A always have to be proceeded by B, C, D, or could you do D first? And what does that do to your operation? And so kind of that idea of curiosity has always served me well. I used to be really intrigued by my bicycle. And so what happens if I spin this bolt off? Oh my gosh, a whole bunch of ball bearings just fell out of my axle. What do I do now? So understanding why something is what it is and how could it be done differently, and just being curious about things and never losing that curiosity, being open to new opportunities and trying to, take advantage of whatever it is. Maybe you're not working on the best project, but what can you learn from this project that you could apply it to another project? Everybody always talks about, well, I'm going to be stuck doing, door schedules and toilet room details. They have to get done by somebody, and those aren't the simplest things to do. They can be very complicated. Stair details, all those things have to work and they're part of the project. And so understanding how everything goes together is all driven to me by curiosity. And is there a different way to do this? Could we do this differently? How can we hold that up? How could we hold that up? What would be the implication of that? I think get yourself connected to somebody that can be an advocate for you. Find an advocate for you. Find a mentor for you. I've had many. I've been able to work with some architects over the years. A friend of my wife's family, Paul Ricca, was a very good influencer to me. I've gone back to him many times throughout my career and asked him, what do you think I should do here? Do you think I should go work at SmithGroup? And he said, yeah, SmithGroup's a great organization. You should go work there. Here's what you want to try to do. It's a big firm, Steve. This is what big firms are like. You got to go in kind of eyes wide open about what it's going to be like. And so I think having those people along the way that can support you because they know what makes you tick. Don't be afraid to get personal with the people that you work with in a respectful way, of course. But get to know people because those are the people that are going to go to bat for you because they know you, they believe in you, and they want the best for you. Those are the people you want as your advocates, and the people that you can go back to and ask, what do you think I should do here? So I think don't be afraid to be real with people that you work with and the people that you know, because it'll be those people that you'll be talking about 30 years later.
All throughout the podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think you were rattling off mentors all throughout this episode and the impact each one of them has on your career in different ways, shapes, forms, helping you transition to different offices and working together, separate when you leave and then coming back together. You never know where people are going to end up.
Yeah.
So,
and there's certainly many more that went unnamed. And for that, I apologize if I didn't name them. But there has been a long list. We'll do one of those
giant, we'll do a giant ending thing. And it's just the rattling off names.
Yeah.
But I wanted to thank you so much, Steve, for taking the time to speak with me today. I know I've learned so much on your story. I know I've really appreciated you as a boss, and I think have that even more appreciation just learning more about your story, and speaks to the whole conversation on getting to know each other better and how that can build upon the organization, who you work with, and enjoying what we do.
Well, thank you again for asking me. It's been a pleasure. And I have to end this by, again, stating that I think my wife for being with me through thick and thin. It hasn't been easy to be an architect's spouse. And she has done a phenomenal job at loving me through a lot of challenges, for sure.
Yeah, it definitely notes that support system all along the way. So I think it bodes well to start off the podcast with Lisa and end the podcast with Lisa. So hopefully she listens to the whole thing.
Yeah, I hope she does too.
All right. I hope you enjoyed our discussion today. Learn some advice to take with you and see how our industry is all tied together to create the world around us. Check out the description below for any links or resources we discussed. If you liked the episode, please do me a favor and hit the subscribe button. Give me a thumbs up and leave a comment below. It really helps others be able to discover this resource and support finding that career path that best works for them. If you know someone that has inspired your own career that you'd like me to interview, let me know in the comments below, or you can reach out to me via my website or LinkedIn. I'd be happy to share their story or your own. Thank you again, and I cannot wait for the next career story I get to share with you next week.